So these days, cats have almost become a cute character cliche, especially just in Japanese pop culture. But back in the olden days, they were no laughing matter. In fact, cats were viewed as fearful supernatural beings known as yokai. These were powerful spirits that could transform into humans. They could cast horrific curses, and in some cases, devour human flesh. And you would especially see them on spooky nights like tonight. So, The Haunted Castle is a 1969 Japanese horror movie directed by Tokuzo Tanaka. And it was one of the 3 films on the new Dai Gothic Volume 2 box set. And now I proudly have reviews for all the films in both versions. In total, they include Ghost of Yotsuya, The Snow Woman, The Bride of Hades, Demon of Mount Oe, Ghost of Kasane Swamp, and now The Haunted Castle. And I'll just say that The Haunted Castle is probably the spookiest out of all of these. And this is just in terms of having to do with monsters, ghosts, and just a variation of things like vampires. You know, all awesome stuff. Also, expect plenty of just spooky, cheap visuals, which I just have a lot of fun with. And just in an age of crappy CGI, there's just such a great charm to seeing practical effects like this. You know, it's sort of like being a kid and going to one of those, amusement park haunted houses. You know, you kind of just go and you just admire the hard work that's put into it. So it adds a different level of entertainment. And The Haunted Castle defines what I just said, so it's just a perfect movie to watch on Halloween. So as for the story, it's another take on the classic Japanese supernatural tale, The Vampire Cat of Nabeshima. And the events of the story are set in motion, and they involve a blind monk and his sister Sayo. One day they just happen to run into their feudal lord, Lord Nabeshima. And Lord Nabeshima takes a liking to the monk's sister. And he really wants to add her to his collection of concubines. Very romantic. And so he dispatches an underling to ask the blind monk about her. But he understandably refuses, offering the excuse that Sayo is too awkward of a girl. And also just that the lord just wouldn't find her very interesting. Nabeshima gets angry at this excuse, and he eventually loses his temper and kills him. If the news gets out about this, it's not going to go well, so they pretend to not know anything about it, and they dump the body in a well. Fearing discovery, they also banish the sister Sayo, but she goes for the option of committing harakiri. Right before she dies, she begs a nearby cat to drink her blood and become a demon to enact her revenge. And that's when the true horror and fun begins. So the good thing about this movie is that they wisely chose to have the ghost cats come out at night. So the majority of this film takes place in this intense darkness. The pre-electric setting really just makes movies like this even better. And it just adds such a level of creepiness that you just wouldn't get in the modern age. And this is a good reason why I just love horror movies that take place in feudal Japan or just even in the olden days before electricity. And this also ends up helping the practical effects, relies more on lighting. But I like how the ghost cats in this sort of stalk their victims quietly. The only sound they make is the tinkling of this very ghostly bell. It's very creepy. And they leave behind these tiny bloody paw prints as just evidence of a supernatural killing. So it really ends up freaking everyone out. And if you've dug into some Japanese folklore, you probably are familiar with the Bakeneko. This is basically a shape-shifting cat who wanders through just a number of these folktales. And the Bakeneko really takes place in the haunted castle. Though the official English title of this film was actually The Secret Chronicles of the Ghost Cat. And this movie is no doubt similar to the classic 1968 film Kuroneko, great director who also did Onibaba. And Kuroneko also had women that would take on the form of these vengeful cat spirits, and they would sort of attack people similar to vampires like this film. And the Haunted Castle is no doubt a lesser version of this story. Kuroneko was just such a classic. In fact, I believe it has some of the best lighting effects and just atmospheres in a horror movie. But the Haunted Castle still manages to tell a different variation of just that kind of a story. So it still ends up feeling like its own film. And director Tanaka sort of goes for a floating, dreamlike shooting style. It brings a real level of hypnotic confusion, which also manages to just keep up high levels of tension throughout the film. And it also helps that this movie's only an hour and 20 minutes, so the pacing is pretty good. It doesn't really drag at all. But the film really just gets going when we have a demonic cat spirit just going on a bloody rampage. That's the true fun of this film. And the ghost in this, I will say, is pretty effective in just giving you the creeps. They did a really good job with the makeup on her. And there's really some great, just iconic shots of her. And very fittingly, they chose to put this ghost on the cover of the box set. Ultimately, the moral of this tale is to really live your life in a more unselfish manner, which is very Japanese. Just stuff like stop trying to take things that aren't yours, or, respect the views of others. And also not to lose your temper and kill people for no reason at all. This is all just great advice. And the hero of this story is a very sympathetic vassal. His name is Komori. And from the start, he's really just trying to come up with this satisfactory outcome for everyone. But he finds himself frustrated at just being the servant of a very unreasonable feudal lord. Someone who really just can't be restrained at all. Komori can't avoid the supernatural retribution, but he manages to just go along with it just to ensure a morally satisfying ending. Corruption is exposed, and the land being returned to its rightful owners. It's an old story, but it's just a good one, and it's presented with a level of sophistication. It really makes the film one of the better ghost story samurai films of the late 60s. This is also my favorite of the box set, and it's really what I was looking for the most. Just a great atmospheric samurai ghost story, but it has a charming effect that at least I really enjoy. So hopefully this film finally just gets some kind of recognition. It really deserves it. And both of these are just great box sets, and I overall recommend them. Anyway, thanks for watching my Halloween series this year, and, hopefully I'll see you next year, God willing. Hopefully with some more spooky samurai movies. Anyway, thanks so much, and have a happy Halloween. And watch out for those ghost cats.